Hi, welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Live. I'm SME Senior Editor Michael McConnell, and I'm here with our editorial staff, Editor Rachel Thomas and Associate Editor Cary Gitter. Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey, hi.
Great to be here.
Yeah, Cary, you're back.
I am back after a bit of time off to have a baby boy, so I'm glad to be back with you guys.
Well, congrats, and we're glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely.
Gosh, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, a lot of things to talk about. Where do you want to start? Cary, you want to start with you?
Sure, absolutely. So, just this Monday, we had an industry update come out, the manufacturing PMI report issued by the Institute for Supply Management, which comes out monthly, and that's kind of an economic indicator of the health of the industry across different sectors, surveying executives from various different aspects of manufacturing. And for the second month in a row, the industry is in expansion territory, which
good news.
Yeah, very good news. And I know Rachel covered the report last month, and that was the first expansion month, January, in a long time. And so this month of expansion in February is actually only the third in 40 months. Mostly the industry's been in contraction. And you can see some metrics there on the various different indexes, new orders, production. So they're growing, although the rate of expansion slowed a bit. From January, it was 52.6%. That was the manufacturing PMI. And in February, it was 52.4%. So there was a 0.2 drop off, but Susan Spence, who's the spokesperson there for ISM, said, that this is still growth, just at a slower pace, with some indexes becoming a bit more sluggish this month. But there were comments from respondents that were positive, saying business is improving, backlogs are growing, and that's something that we haven't heard in quite a while.
But at the same time, I imagine the geopolitical news kind of overshadowed a lot of things, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. So this call was Monday morning when the report was issued, and obviously coming off a very eventful geopolitical weekend. And so there were several press questions about the conflict with Iran and the effect that that's going to have on the manufacturing industry. And Susan Spence basically said, what one would assume, which is that supply chain volatility is going to be a major fallout from this, and that manufacturers across sectors can't be too prepared. So, at this point, we don't know how long the conflict's going to last. It could be weeks, it could be months. And so she was really advocating for business owners, executives to shore up those supply chains and plan accordingly, for the worst case scenario, so that, because we're already seeing, especially with energy and fuel, supply chain effects happening right now. And that's very much in the news. So, but it's not only going to be those industries affected. There's a multitude of supply chain issues that could be ripple effects from the conflict. So, yeah, manufacturers should really keep an eye on how those ripple effects could influence their particular business.
Yeah, and can you guys hear me? I'm sorry, I think my connection's a bit choppy. Is there any lag?
Yeah,
you guys
you sound good to us.
Okay, good. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I hope I can hear everyone okay. But yeah, I am curious. I know, Cary, you quoted in your piece for us, you were saying, Susan Spence of ISM said you can never be too prepared regarding, the uncertainty with the war. Did she specifically say, like, how manufacturers can prepare, or do you have any thoughts on that yourself?
Well, I think, the best thing that manufacturers can do, based on what Susan was saying in the call, is just to really evaluate their current supply chains with regard to what's going on in the Middle East, and how their particular lines of supply may be affected. So, some businesses and some industries may have a big crossover with the Middle East and with with materials coming out of there, and others may have less. So it really is dependent on the business, but it's taking a look at your business's supply chain and figuring out what those effects could be, and taking proactive steps to mitigate them. Maybe switching suppliers or reevaluating. Because as I said before, we don't know the duration of the conflict, so it could have lasting effects.
Yeah, I wanted how you said it just depends on, the different sector in the industry. I know you quoted a fabricated metal specialist in your story saying, their business was improving and, there's opportunities everywhere. But when I was reading through the press release on the ISM website, I saw another quote from a chemical products professional saying, and I have the quote here: "Today, American produced commodities like steel and aluminum are the highest price in the world by far. Hence, the Section 232 tariff policy is having the exact opposite effect of their intention on an American manufacturer like us. It is raising prices while lowering demand and profitability." Just to read that quote there. So it was interesting to see the different sides.
Well, yeah, and this February report was kind of interestingly timed because the data in there really doesn't reflect A, this new conflict in the Middle East, or B, the recent Supreme Court decision on tariffs and the effects that's going to have, which Mike will talk about a bit later. So yeah, people from different sectors in this month's report were still citing tariffs and tariff volatility as a business challenge. But it remains to be seen how that might shift, or because right now tariffs have been voided, but may still be in place. So we're in kind of a weird limbo with that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see in March's report where things stand then.
Kind of the timing of the press call was kind of unfortunate. I mean, think about it.
It was kind of right on the precipice of these huge developments that are going to have such big effects. So I think March there'll be a lot of really fascinating information coming out. Rachel, wanted to shift to you. I know you just took a field trip recently to Autotool in Columbus, Ohio. Is that correct?
Outside of Columbus, Plain City, which I had never heard of prior to the trip. I hadn't been to Ohio too many times outside of, Columbus and Sandusky for like Cedar Point. So new territory for me.
Fun. So tell us a bit about your trip and what was being showcased there and what robotics and automation technology you saw.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at the Autotool facility, like we mentioned, in Plain City, Ohio. It's a beautiful campus, just lots of natural lighting, good at like employee space. We kind of got to walk around through the whole facility. And then on the main shop floor area, while there were different, machining cells and things over towards like the back of the shop floor and the front area where there was about 20 almost technology partners that were presenting their own, industry things like their equipment, pamphlets and things like that. So it was cool that as you walk to the shop floor, immediately you're welcomed by those tech partners. And then Autotool Tech Day itself was, as the name mentioned, a big way to showcase automations that are happening in the industry right now. And it was powered by KUKA Connections, which is an ongoing initiative by KUKA to, bring different industry experts and those type of partners together. So there were about, I want to say 4 keynotes from KUKA, JCB, EWI, and then the Ohio State University's Center for Design, Manufacturing and Excellence. And so those kind of happen throughout the day, and they provide wonderful insights, very conversational style. They had their presentation going, but took a lot of questions from the audience as well. And then in between those keynotes, you can go back downstairs to look at the cells downstairs and then speak with those booths. So it was really cool. I enjoyed it. Yeah, as the video shows, there's one of the cells I was talking about. So yeah, it was cool. I had never been to something like that, so it was cool.
Yeah, you got some great footage and photos, and also did a really nice write-up, which I wanted to ask you one question about that. One of the speakers, it sounds like, spoke about AI at the event and the effect that could have on automation and manufacturing. Can you talk a bit about what he said, and how artificial intelligence might be playing a role in future automation technology.
Yeah. Yeah, AI, of course, as you know, is a big thing for the entire industry, but specifically looking at automation, it was something that both Steve Forrest of Autotool and then also J. Logan McNeil, he talked about it in his presentation as well. That, especially with bin picking, is what the biggest thing that I was seeing with how AI could come in to play. There was a tech partner there named Apera. I hope I'm saying the company's name right, but they had a really cool demonstration of how the Apera visioning software can be used for bin picking. So in the demo, I don't think I have a photo for us to see, but there was a Apera camera above a KUKA bin picking setup.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't unfortunately get to see the full demo because every time I tried to go back down, they're like, "Oh, we just finished it up." And I was like, "Oh darn!" But it seemed like it was a pretty cool setup of just how to show, bin picking and how the Apera system could, scan the different objects, and that way the robot could be able to pick up what's needed from the bin picking. So that was just like one of the specific things that it was focused on for AI. But again, yeah, the 4D vision tech for industrial robotics and things was a big discussion.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Rachel, we mentioned the audience. Was it a lot of press people like us, or was it a lot of customers? Who came to this event?
Yeah, it was funny. And I think actually Steve, our editor in chief, had asked me that when I came back. I think I was the only press person there, at least
wow.
from who I spoke with. A lot of them seemed the people I got to speak with from KUKA and everything else. A lot of sales managers, account managers, people who, regularly go to these events and present their products and technologies. But I think I was the only press person. There's a couple times when people are like, "Oh, you're here to cover the you're gonna do a recap, or are you doing?" They thought I might be the social media person. I'm like, "No, I'm just getting," which I do take photos for social media, but very casually from my phone, no professional setup.
Right.
But yeah, so it was cool to have that side of just be able to be a journalist there.
Yeah, people get excited when they find out that that press is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Mike, what are you saying?
No, it's okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you too, Cary. Have you been around robots like that before, Rachel? Have you been around that kind of environment?
No, actually, this job here at SME Media is my first foray into, manufacturing. Previous roles I've, reported or talked about tech startups and things like that, but manufacturing in this sector is my first foray fully into, going directly to the shop floors and seeing these robots, these automation technologies and things. So this was my first time, especially seeing, there was a KUKA autonomous mobile robot. I think it's called the KMP 3000P. And while we were all on the shop floor, yeah, there it is right there. It was literally kind of maneuvering around the people on the floor. It would use its scanner. It's 3D cameras, and it has a laser sensor, and it would know when to stop and kind of assess its surroundings, and then kind of maneuver around the people on the floor. And it was holding a piece of Autotool steel as it was going, because the KUKA robots could be used for I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the word that they were talking about, but basically pick up and drop off materials and things like that. So
it sounds pretty cool. Was there anything you were really impressed with seeing?
Yeah, let me think. Really the KUKA robot that was just shown on the screen, that was really cool to see it be able to, like I said, maneuver around us, know when to stop, kind of turn. They had arrows with duct tape on the floor, and I think that's what the robot was following. I'm not sure if it actually knew these are taped arrows, but it was kind of going around it, so maybe it did know what that was. So that was really cool to see. And then also that cell in the video that was just on the screen as well, that was pretty cool. I don't think I mentioned the exact name of it in my write-up, so I am blanking on what that cell was doing, but that was also another cool technology.
Yeah, and for anybody who's interested in automation, the Automate conference is coming up in June in Chicago, and I had the chance to attend that in Detroit last May. And it was really like an incredible showcase of robotics. Everything from AMRs to cobots to humanoid robots. There was a little dog robot hopping around the show floor. So I saw some pretty amazing stuff last year, and I wish that were in Detroit again in 2026. But yeah, that's a great showcase for automation.
Yeah, that was something I remember talking to another attendee. They were like, "Oh, you have to go to that." So we'll see if one of us gets sent if we're going.
Yeah.
Rachel, you mentioned there was a number of speakers, and did any of those people talk about the acceptance of robotics in the manufacturing industry?
Yeah, I feel like that was the resounding, they're here to stay. These are definitely things. I remember Steve during his talk was like, automation is all around us. Steve Forrest of Autotool, he gave a brief intro of the company, and then, it was really just like automation is here to stay. And if I remember, J. Logan McNeil from EWI, he had mentioned that, that with any type of new technology, automation can definitely present its like obstacles and challenges. As you have older veterans in the industry who may, not to say like they're stuck in their ways, but just like maybe a little bit more cautious about bringing in automation technologies, whereas you have like newer people to the industry, like younger folks who are like gravitating directly right to those spaces. So it's definitely a mix of, I believe McNeil had said, the dynamic of the shop floor may change, and there's also definitely going to need to be like hirings and trainings, like that type of workforce development in there. So, but it seemed like there was most of the people were looking forward to these new technologies and automation.
Yeah, I was wondering if any companies are still hesitant, because some people are set in their ways and they're skeptical about new technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that J. Logan McNeil from EWI, he was the only one that I remember, really taking some time to talk about, there are obstacles, there are challenges. Not everybody's going to be immediately ready to implement these. He did say that the best way to go about it is not taking every single new technology and like, oh, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that, because that will definitely overwhelm your company. It's really about picking the best tools to best run your business. So yeah,
be more strategic.
Yeah, exactly. Be more strategic. Slow increments of like, well, not slow, but like smaller increments of bringing it into your business.
Yeah, and probably for a lot of these business owners too, with the workforce gaps, they're dealing with automation's kind of like a necessity. Just to get that work done, because they don't have the labor that they need all the time to fill those positions.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a couple of times that was brought up, bin picking will be great for to address that, especially as, forklift operators, they're retiring. They did say that being a forklift operator, it's not like the most like glamorous work. You're not finding a lot of people who just want to, take that role on. So that's where like bin picking, for example, or, like forklift operating could come into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to an open house a few months back at Anderson Material Handling, which is a company here in Michigan. And they specialize in, material handling, bin picking, all of that. And they were introducing a lot of automation solutions as well for that very reason. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked how, another general theme with those speakers, they're very real about the unglamorous sides of, the industry and how we can find ways to, best support the workers and, the business and everything. People first, for sure.
So they were not just saying these robots are going to replace everyone. That was not the...
Yeah, it wasn't like, sorry guys, pack it up. Like, no, it's definitely, like, for example, like cobots, it was very much a collaborative, we can implement these to best, take over like the workforce development challenges and just bring that all together.
Oh, cool.
Great. Mike, I want to segue into your discussion here with a question.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we have such a wild news cycle lately, just can you start with the basics? What is the recent Supreme Court decision on tariffs, and what does that mean for where we're at right now with the tariff situation?
All right. Well, how much time do we have? Okay. Because the tariffs, which the president implemented back in April of last year, if I recall, and if
Mhm.
you know anything about the history of Donald Trump, he's not a new convert to tariffs. He has always believed that. You read some of his books from the '80s and some of his interviews at the time. He really believed that Japan with the automotive industry in the '80s was ripping off America, and so he's really believed that. So nothing's changed there, but now he's in a position to actually affect some change, and so he implemented these tariffs, some of which were they're actually all of them are fairly high. I mean, really the highest we've seen in 100 years because economists on both sides of the aisle have gotten away from tariffs, and other than using them strategically, just as a general rule, they're not the main way to raise revenue. At least they had not been in the recent past. But the president had a different philosophy, so he came in, he put in these tariffs. Immediately went to a lawsuit because he claimed he used a law that is known as AIPA. I forget what that stands for, but it's a 1977 law that deals with emergencies, and so it gives the president certain powers because there's an emergency to deal with these problems. The president liked that law, using that law for imposing these tariffs because he didn't have to go through Congress, so he didn't have to have a vote on the record with that. He could say, we're instituting these tariffs. These countries are going to pay this amount or this amount or that amount. However, of course, a lot of importers who actually pay those tariffs when they bring product into the U.S. Did not like it, and so they sued. And it took a while for the lawsuit to go through the courts, even though it was on an expedited path. And just back on February 20th, I think. So very short time ago, they were declared unconstitutional. The Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice John Roberts, said that the law was never intended to be used in a way that totally disregarded Congress, because historically Congress has always had the power of the purse and the ability to set tariff rates. So that was a loss. But the White House has not changed their tone much. They immediately said they're going to institute for the next 150 days new tariffs. I think at 10% or maybe 15%, which are those going to be subject to lawsuits eventually too. But in the short term, tariffs are still here, but they are, in some cases, they're less than they were before because the rates varied by country. These are flat amounts, 10 or 15%. And in other countries, it's quite a bit more than they had negotiated with the administration. So things are really crazy. And then just yesterday, I think, a federal judge said the White House needs to start refunding that money. And of course, while he may have said they need to start doing that, it really is a very slow process to see when and if that'll actually ever happen.
Yeah.
So kind of crazy. I don't know how much you guys have been following it other than reading some of the pieces I wrote, but I don't know if you'd want to make a bet on whether or not the tariffs will still be here in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure how I would bet on that either.
Yeah, I think
don't know.
I'll save my money on that
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Are you getting any sense of the reactions from the manufacturing industry and from businesses?
The businesses that were out in front of this, saying these were a bad idea and unconstitutional, they're already announcing, we'd like our refund money, please. Some of the major companies like Federal Express, FedEx, I believe they're on the record in court saying that. But a lot of them are kind of holding back just to wait and see how it shakes out, because things have been so erratic. They don't want to make a business decision without knowing where things are going to go. So they've been relatively quiet, at least in my experience. I mean, I think you probably have tariffs came up some of those PMI calls you were on, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, month to month since last year, that's a consistent refrain from manufacturers across various sectors that the tariffs have been a challenge to their business and an economic burden and an obstacle to growth. At least that's been a common complaint as the industry was contracting. Although with these last 2 months of expansion, perhaps that's been mitigated somewhat by other factors. But yeah, no, it's definitely, there's been a lot of yeah, a lot of negative, responses to the effects of the tariffs on these businesses from these leaders.
Although to be fair, tariffs. I think I wrote one of these pieces too. Tariffs do have winners and losers. There are certain businesses that always benefit from a tariff.
Right.
The steel industry is one that they've been very happy about these because
Sure.
they're able to sell more because of the higher prices that they were competing against. And losing oftentimes, they're now able to better compete because they can't come in. Other countries can't come in and undercut their steel prices.
Right.
So yeah, it's not hard to find manufacturers that have been happy with the tariffs, although there's plenty that have not, of course.
Yeah, I think it seems to be a lot of those small to medium-sized manufacturers that have been hit harder, in terms of their supply chains and sourcing materials and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mike, I know in your story that just went up shortly before this live stream, there's supposed to be another case hearing scheduled for this Friday.
Yeah.
Do you think
pretty quick, really?
Yeah. Do you think that expected appeal that you mentioned in your story, do you think that will work, or do you? Yeah, I guess there's no way to tell, but
no, I've never even pretended to be a trade lawyer, so I wouldn't guess. And I haven't read a lot of articles that have said what they think is going to happen. Although most of the articles I have seen and what the president certainly said is, or some of the people in the administration, there are other laws that have been tested. So the White House definitely has other avenues that they can institute, if not these exact tariffs, similar tariffs, maybe similar in scope or in level, but they may not go as long. They may have to re-up them under different laws. But the White House seems to be committed to them as a tool, as an economic and a policy tool. So we'll just see. I'm sure there'll be more stories to write.
Yeah, I'm curious too for you, Mike and Cary, if you guys have any input. With the recent rulings, how will you say, if there is any direct, immediate impact for the daily life of just the average Americans? Are there any immediate effects? Or I know people are kind of worried, will gas go up immediately? Or
gas is always a commodity, so it goes up and it goes down. Obviously, when there's geopolitical stuff going on, like in Iran, that's a bigger issue in the short term for gasoline. But tariffs, they're tricky because they're not obvious. You don't get a bill for your coffee that has in the bottom of the receipt. You bought a pound of coffee, it includes 28 cents in tariffs. It's kind of mixed in there. So it's hard to say if it would have an impact on everyone's daily life. The other issue is once prices go up, except for commodities, it's hard for them to come down. Things get priced in, and businesses are reluctant to lower because their costs are always on a slow or hopefully or not so slow. Sometimes trek upward. They're reluctant to roll things back, and so I don't know. I fear that we may these will be with us for a while in some form, and even if other people want to get rid of them, a new administration, it's hard once that money comes in, it gets spent. And then what do you do? And so that's another thing I've read about. A lot of analysts have concerns about, and there's no good answer as of yet.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
A lot of turbulence. So, but thank
you. A lot of turbulence.
Rachel, you have something happier to talk about, right? To close this out.
Yeah, just to kind of wrap things up. There'll always be ongoing conversations to pay attention to on that, but. Yeah, on a slightly happier note, as I mentioned during our last live stream, we are still in, our 2026 30 Under 30 program. Nominations are still very much open. This program, as the name, dictates, we highlight 30 professionals, whether they're, college-age students, doing research or things in college or in their classes, or people who are out in their career, just making paving the way in the manufacturing industry. You can nominate them at the link that is on the screen right now, advancedmanufacturing.org/30 under 30. Just some of the criteria again: the person must be 30 or younger as of December 31st, 2026, and self-nominations are welcome, so you can definitely nominate yourself. And nominations close April 17th. So there is time, but time always flies. So don't wait too long to get your person in if you want to nominate.
Yeah, and this is a fantastic project that I really enjoyed working on last year. There's so many amazing people that we showcase, and it's incredible what some of them are doing, whether they're in graduate school or founding startups early in their careers. It's just a really impressive and inspiring array of manufacturing talent out there. So amid this news cycle that can be a bit disheartening or hard to keep up with, this is always a bright spot that we love to showcase the positivity there.
Absolutely, a great diverse array of people, and I look forward to those profiles on the people who are honored this year in a publication. So, but yeah, so looks like we're at the end of our fifth, Advanced Manufacturing Live. We got a few episodes under our belt, so it's a great conversation with you guys today.
Thank you.
As always, thank you for tuning in. I'm SME Media Editor Rachel Thomas.
I'm Cary Gitter, SME Media Associate Editor.
And I'm Michael McConnell, SME Media Senior Editor.
And thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.